radio show. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 8 minutes past the hour, moving into the third hour of the broadcast today on this 30th day of July. We're very much looking forward to speaking with Leslye Abbey this hour. Now, she is a documentary filmmaker, a photographer, and a social worker, also a New York native. Leslye spent the last number of years traveling around the world creating documentary films that really seek to portray and reflect the human spirit in action. I had a movie of hers come across my desk recently, and she's agreed to come on the air to speak with us about it today. The movie that she created is called Buffalo Nation. The Children Are Crying. Now, this story focuses on the Lakota Sioux Indians and does such a great job of talking about their conditions and the history that has led to the conditions that these poor people are going through right now. And this is a situation where this is happening here in our country, and there's something that we can actually do about it. And Leslye Abbey is sort of leading the charge here to draw attention to an issue that for so many is just out of sight and out of mind.
Good point.
Leslye Abbey, thank you so much for joining us on the Power Hour today.
Thank you very much for having me. This is quite a privilege for me.
Well, it's our pleasure. I think that with so much going on in the world today, especially things overseas, the wars, the coming pandemics, all kinds of things, it's important to not lose focus on the things that we can affect here in our own country also, because I think that that's a very important aspect to living in America, is taking care of our own. And as many as people would like to dismiss these people as our own, they certainly are our own. Leslye, I'd like to know, and I think our listeners would like to know just a little bit more about you, what your experience was like working with the Lakota Sioux, and how you got interested in making a documentary film about your experience.
Well, it's a long story. In 1980, I was working and living in New Mexico, and I was working with pre-released offenders. And most of them were the ones that were on my caseload that came to me, actually, which was quite interesting, were the American Indians of the Southwest. And most of their, I would say over 90% of their offenses were alcohol-related. So I came back to New York and got my degree in alcoholism counseling, and then went on to get my master's. And in the meantime, I was getting, outreach for donations for the American Indian tribes, and one of them was for the Oglala Lakota College. And I would send them money, and then after a while I said, I have a skill. Why am I just sending a few dollars for donation when I think that it would be better for me? I'd feel more helpful if I were to go to the reservation and perhaps present some alcohol workshops or do a course. And then I enlisted my friend, who became my friend, actually. I was referred to her, Dr. Catherine Papel. She passed away last year at the age of 97. And she helped me write this program. And then we found out that we had the opportunity to go there and present the workshops. And she said, I'll go with you. And at this point, she was 88 years old, and we were flying. First, we had to make a connection because there's no direct flight into Rapid City from New York. And we wound up after Colorado, going to Colorado, and then flying on this 17-seater plane. And we presented workshops there. Since then, I've made friends, family, and I've been involved with them on a personal level. In 2008, Red Bear sent me an email with the header that said, I think you'll be interested in this.
Okay, wait, now hold on a second, Leslye. I know there's a little bit more to that Red Bear story than I think you're letting on right now, and that moved me yesterday. So could you kind of extrapolate on the Red Bear story for us?
Yeah, I didn't know who Red Bear was, but this Red Bear was sending me different information emails about the American Indians. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of went on and off here and there. And she sent me, I don't know who Red Bear really is, sent me an article by Stephanie M. Schwartz, and the article was The Arrogance of Ignorance, Hidden Away, Out of Sight, and Out of Mind, which really was a wonderful, in-depth article about the state of affairs on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. what really struck me was the fact that the children, the youth, were committing suicide at a rate of 150% greater than mainstream American children. So I thought about how, as a social worker and now a documentary filmmaker, what could I do? How could I be involved with this? People had to know what was going on. I mean, shocking. We hear so much, as you said, about, what's going on in other countries, in other parts of the world, what other countries are doing to other countries, and how we're supposedly saving other people, and yet we ignore what is going on often in our own country.
Yeah, and that was the impression that I was left with the film overall, just generally. I mean, to be honest, there were a lot of things that surprised me about the film. It was longer than I expected. It was a lot more in depth than I expected it to be, and there were some stereotypes I will admit that I went into the film with that were completely destroyed, and I was really left with the impression that something can be done, and I think that was probably the most poignant thing that I took away from the film, is that something, A, has been done to these people. It was an agenda. And that, B, something now can be done here in our home country. We can do something for people and see the results and feel good about it. And, I think when I walked away from the film, that was what I was really presented with. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the history of the agenda. One of the things that struck me about the film was this idea that these people now are left with almost a split, a case of dual identity, where, there was an agenda that began such a long time ago to separate them from their culture and trying to bring them into our culture. And I can't imagine how difficult that would be, but I wonder if you can talk about that history of the agenda and how that agenda has led us to the point where the conditions are so poor now.
Well, it's interesting, and I can't quote Michael Moore exactly, but I remember him saying our country was founded by genocide and built on the backs of slaves. And, that even though we know that on some level, when you hear it, it's just so profound to think that this is what our country, who we are as a people, not individually, but, as a government program. When you look at how we did get this country, the indigenous people here were welcoming. They were probably very startled and then accepting, and yet the people that came here wanted their land, their country, their minerals, everything that America had at the time. Of course, we've done a lot of destruction to what we thought we wanted, but nevertheless, we took their country, and we left them with very little. Mm-hmm. Also, I think it's important to realize that, we are a first world people. They are indigenous people. And they were living, their natural way up until the 1600s when America started to move to the West and introduced some good things and a lot of very negative things, because we actually took everything that they had and destroyed it, basically.
Mm-hmm. I was surprised to find out that the Indian reservations were actually established as POW camps. I had absolutely no idea that was the case.
Wow.
And then, on top of that, the idea that the Christian missionaries had come in and set up boarding schools outside and started, bringing the Indians away from their families. And I think one of the other points that surprised me about the movie was that intentional breakup of the family unit. And what do you think, how much of a factor was that in where we are now with the conditions that we see? And what are some of those conditions that people might not know about?
Well, the conditions are, besides the children who feel hopeless, and that's very sad, because in order to really push forward, we need to provide hope that something can happen, that something will change. And yet, we're known to assimilate, quote-unquote, people, so we kind of make them American. And yet, that's our greatest strength, is the diversity of our populations. Splitting families, we did that during the slavery days. And what we did with the Lakota was to take away their very essence of their life, which is their family, their spirituality. I won't say religion, because religion for mainstream America means, praying at a certain designated once a week, facility, a church or whatever. Mm-hmm. And yet their religion or their spirituality was the way they lived every day. Now we've taken away their language. We're trying to take away most of their culture. Very few young people really have any idea of the history of their own people and who they are, their spirituality, their mores, their culture, their family. A lot of that's been lost.
Leslye, I would like to hear what you think is the difference between their lives and ours. For instance, we need to set the stage for what is their daily life like. And I know the alcohol consumption is so huge within the reservations. But if you could kind of give us a feeling of what their life is like on a daily basis.
Well, it's interesting when you think of a group or of people or a population, you see people integrated or they're living in neighborhoods, and yet they're involved with everyday life in their state, in their town, even though they may be living in, quote-unquote, a ghetto. But
okay, we're going to come back from this break, and we'll pick up at that point with our guest today. Stay tuned to the Power Hour. This is Joyce Riley.
And JD.
And Leslye Abbey is our guest. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Power Hour radio show, ladies and gentlemen. 24 minutes past the hour. We're speaking with Leslye Abbey today about her film, Buffalo Nation, The Children Are Crying, which is a look at the Lakota Sioux Indian. I feel like maybe I should backtrack here because I don't know if I've done my background enough here. And I'm wondering if you could just quickly talk about who the Lakota Sioux are, where this reservation is, how many people we're actually talking about. And then I want to get back into the conditions that they live with, what it actually means to live on a reservation today. Leslye.
Yes, the Lakota Sioux are part of the band of the seven Siouan tribes. Now, I can't be exact because I'm not an historian, but I do know that there are many reservations that have the Sioux people living on them in the areas of South Dakota, North Dakota, Cheyenne, that general area, which is not densely populated. Very much they gave most of the Indian nations land that nobody wanted at that time. In fact, as part of the Lakota live in Pine Ridge, live on the they don't live on the Badlands, but they gave them part of the Badlands as, for them you can kind of get a feel of what is on the reservation. No trees. It's really high prairie, and the population of South Dakota, I don't know, but I don't think it's very high. The Sioux live on Pine Ridge, 150 miles, I think it's southeast, but I'm not exactly sure, but it's that amount of distance from Rapid City, which is not a very large town. The largest town near Pine Ridge Reservation is in Denver, Colorado, which is over 350 miles away. So now you have an isolated group of people living on this prisoner of war camp, which is approximately the size of Connecticut. There's about 28,000 people living on that reservation. Some say as high as 40,000, others say 20,000. You can get that kind of idea of how many thousands of people living on the state of Connecticut and realize that the distance between towns and the amount of people living there is very little. And yet they have no resources really coming in or going out. They're really kind of isolated, given the location, the people who they are, the lack of transportation, poor education, poor health care, and a lot of alcohol. So.
Well, what about things like the living conditions, ability to get resources? What about jobs, things like that? What are the situations in those arenas?
Yeah, thank you for helping me focus. The joblessness rate is about 80 to 85%. There are no jobs. There's a lot of alcohol, and I think that, in a way, is kind of keeping them down. I think that's really important to understand, because that's how America conquered most of the indigenous people, is by giving them alcohol. Alcohol is foreign to the indigenous people, and I'm going to speak specifically about the Lakota people. They were a nomadic people. They hunted buffalo, and they traveled. And they were also warrior people. What we did was, when we couldn't really assimilate them, so to speak, we killed all the buffaloes, so we starved them to death. Mm-hmm. Like, it's really, incredible.
Well,
so they're living with very little. The Indian Health Service is there. They're not, the government doesn't have a lot of money. That probably doesn't have very little money left. And so their health care is poor, their education is poor, and the dropout rate is very high. And just to focus, their infant mortality rate is like 300% greater than ours. Mm-hmm. And you have a population with no ability to make any kind of moves to get out of this situation without outside help.
One of the things I want to mention is that what you said about the government doesn't have any money to help them out. The government's got plenty of money to go and kill other people in other countries, fight wars, and do things that have nothing to do with taking care of people. This is all by design. Yes. This is all by design to annihilate a people and have them eventually drink themselves to death. I used to live right next to an Indian reservation, and it's so by design they do this. They have plenty of money to help out anybody they choose to.
Absolutely.
We'll be back after this 3-minute break. This is the Power Hour. This is Joyce.
And JD. And Leslye Abbey. Keep it right here.
Caring about your world, doing the next right and honorable thing. And I want to encourage you again to get Living Clay and the Super Silver, which, by the way, you can use together. And we were so glad to learn that you can actually put the Living Clay to use that as your moisture to make, use the silver to make your Living Clay. And it's available at the Power Mall in 10 parts per million, 40 parts per million, and the spray, which is 200 parts per million, adding that to your Living Clay. And get the book, Nature's Own Miracle Cure, Calcium Bentonite Clay. There's a reason it was used in the Bible. There's a reason that it works. So get that at the Power Mall, 877-817-9829. Lots of specials going on at the Power Mall. Please buy from the good guys, and that's how we stay on the air. We really appreciate all of you who do business with the Power Hour.
Speaking of appreciation, we very much appreciate being joined by Leslye Abbey today, who's the creator of the documentary Buffalo Nation. And again, we're talking about the Lakota Sioux Indians and the conditions that they live in, and this agenda of malignment that has come down the pipe on these people. I wanted to mention this quote that I read from Desmond Tutu, because I think it's poignant to what we're talking about right now. And this is a quote about the missionaries in Africa. And Desmond said, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. And they said, let us pray. We closed our eyes, and when we opened them, we had the Bible and they had the land. Wow. And I think that really speaks to this overreaching agenda that has permeated not only, foreign countries, but our country as well. And again, I think a lot of people just don't want to accept the fact that we have put these people into a position where it's easy to forget about them. And I'd really like to spend the time today remembering them and trying to come up with some solutions that we can enact here in our own country. I wanted to talk about alcoholism on the reservations, because I believe that, obviously this is a huge stereotype that permeates, all of our collective thoughts in terms of Native Americans. But what struck me about your film is that it didn't really seek to destroy that stereotype, but what it did was it showed me the reason that condition exists. And I think that that's important to understand, that the condition does exist, but that there is a reason. And what really struck me is the fact that alcohol is illegal on reservations. And yet there seems to be this pervasive theme of inaction by any type of enforcement or, police doing anything to protect these kids. So again, we're seeing this agenda. Will you talk about alcoholism and some of the other conditions that do exist and just how they came to be, Leslye?
Yeah, I think that we read and we know that people came here and they would give alcohol, sit down and drink, and alcohol was foreign to the indigenous people. Many indigenous people, I don't know so much about the East Coast, but I do know and don't forget, we talk about indigenous people, we talk about Africa. Africa is a continent. The United States is a continent. We just can't say Americans because, when we look at Americans, the people in New York are so different than the people in Arkansas, who are so different than the people in Montana, we're, as a nation, we're one. As a continent in Africa, there are many. And, just taking one country in Africa, here we have states, so we're more cohesive. But one country in Africa has maybe 8 or 30, or I'm sure more, over 100 different tribal groups, because, again, we're talking about indigenous people. And so each tribe has different, mores, customs. Yes, they share many of, in the same area, the same demographic area, very similar traits, but they all, and you can look at Mexico, you see the same thing. They're very separate in their beliefs, in their customs, in the way they dress, etc. Mm-hmm. The mores. But for alcohol, getting back to alcohol, that was not a part of the Lakota Sioux and many other indigenous people in that area. So I didn't understand until my girlfriend, who's a nurse, said to me, "Did you know that alcohol it cannot be digested by the American Indian? They're not able to assimilate that." And if you see the high rate of diabetes, that only attests to the fact that carbohydrates were never a part of their diet. So when we came and as we continue to give them alcohol, it really disables them in a way that is, different in many ways than mainstream America when they're drinking. Because I think the rate of alcoholism, once they start drinking, they become almost 90%, therefore become alcoholic. Where in this country or in the mainstream part of our country, alcohol is a part of our society and a social kind of lubricant, I guess you could say.
Yeah. That is so true about alcohol in the Indian. My father, we used to live in very close to an Indian reservation. And the Indians, we call them the Indians, were allowed to come in by buses on Thursday night from the Chilocco Indian Reservation in Kansas. And my father had a sign up all the time underneath the rubbing alcohol that said, only 2 bottles of rubbing alcohol per Indian. And they were actually drinking that. He couldn't keep them from buying it, but it was an amazing. I wish I had that sign now, and I can remember that in his handwriting there. But it was a huge problem, and it's only been it's only made worse by the dependency of them on alcohol because they have lost so much foundation in their lives. They have nothing else to go to.
Exactly, and even alcoholic families, it's not just the generation or the people that are drinking currently, it's their father, it's their grandfather, it goes back generations. So this isn't just something that the kids are doing now. They come from alcoholic families. Yeah. Their parents before them were alcoholic, which in a way politically serves a very important purpose because when you're drinking, when you're drunk, when you're sick, you're not able to stand up for yourself and make changes and maybe, deregulate what we know as American society. It doesn't look the same when we introduce other people.
And that's kind of like also the retired military people. They make sure they have plenty of alcohol available at the American Legion and the VFW.
Absolutely.
And they can go and not get real motivated. They just go there and drink every night. I mean, it's a label. I hate to label those people, but that's been provided to them out of convenience. I wanted to ask you, what was your purpose, Leslye, in doing this documentary? What do you want people to gain from it? And by the way, where can they get access to this?
Thank you. As a social worker, as a therapist, I'm the only person out in the field. I don't have a crew. I'm there with my camera. So what happens is when I create a documentary, I'm really creating a look or an insight into the people that that are involved in the actual movie, in the film. And when you look at them, you kind of get to understand that you're looking at more than just a movie, to say a newscast or a drama. You're looking into the soul of these people, and they're crying for help. They need help, because what's happening is another generation, you're not going to have an American Indian. You're going to have, which is now a ghetto. It's more than a reservation. It's a ghetto at this point. And I don't think people realize that.
Well, Leslye, let's talk about what, in your opinion, the best and the worst case scenarios going forward are going to be.
I think that in order to really help these people, we need to focus on the children. They've lost so much. Their parents have lost so much that they were not able, and the grandparents, many of them cannot impart their wisdom, their knowledge, their culture to the children. Kids today want what other kids want. They have a television, you see all these flashy advertisements, and this is what they see, and this is what they want, but they haven't got a clue as how to get it, or, about earning, because nobody's ever taught them our American way of working. And there's no jobs. They want to work. It's not even that they don't know how to work. They want to work, and they're very skilled in many ways.
Right. Well, I have to interject here, because one of the things that I took away from this film was the idea that if these people could be educated in a way that, like the Power Hour, we are, for the most part, self-sufficient people. We all kind of have this desire to build our own homes, to grow our own food, to homeschool our families and things like that. And as I was watching the film, I recognized that the conditions that they were living in were really poor, but that the priorities seemed to be a little wrong. And I will fully admit, obviously, the separation of them from their families throughout the late 1800s all the way up through the 1900s has completely removed their ability to raise a family, because they're dealing with this, duality of, existence, both trying to be Lakota and trying to be American. But I see these people as kind of helpless, and instead of throwing money at the situation, what I felt like I wanted to do was to get into my car, bring them as many seeds, teach them how to grow gardens, teach them how to permaculture, and teach them how to build their own homes. So to me, there has to be some sort of move to re-educate or to empower these people. Do you agree with that, Leslye?
I think empower is really the word. And when you educate and you provide resources and training, that's the answer. They are living in isolation. I'm going back to the ghettos or to the poor neighborhoods here. There's always access in and out. You can move. There's movement. There is nowhere to move. They have no ability to go anywhere. And, it becomes really falling back onto them. The only thing that is some relief for them is to have alcohol. We'll get high. We'll drink. We'll do whatever. We don't have to think about it, because there's nothing to think about. There's absolutely nothing. They're really cut off from the rest of this country. You had asked me also where you could get the movie. I never said, but maybe we could talk about that later.
Yes, please do.
I think this is the most important thing, is how do we open the door for the children? How can we show them that, yes, they can do other things besides getting pregnant, getting drunk, and so frustrated, so, hopeless that they start turning on it against each other. There's no other way to express their anger for them except to express it on each other. So you have domestic violence. You have all kinds of things happening to children. You have gangs. You have robbery. there's no way to make a living or any money, so you steal. What do you steal? You steal from each other. And then you sell what you've got, what you've stolen for drugs, because that's the only thing there really is. Let's get high. Let's just feel good and take away the pain. There's nothing else.
And we are spending, and look how many millions of dollars we're spending to bring children in from Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, wherever, and then we're obviously, by design, the rogue government in this country is not taking care of its own. Those people deserve treatment, help first, in my estimation. They were here first. That we owe them so much, and yet the abuse is just beyond belief. It is by design, and it is Native American genocide. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. I always said, in a few years, you're only going to see Jews in museums in one museum and Indians in the other. There's not going to be anybody left. Craziness.
Leslye, where can we get this film?
You can buy the film from me. My website is snowflakevideo.com. And you could send me an email, snowflakevideo@AOL.com. And I'm distributing the movie at this time. This movie needs to be seen worldwide. People need to know. This is the American shame. This is a shame. This is why it's such a hot political topic, is because nobody wants to really look at that. So we put them in reservations so we don't have to see. We'll just forget about them. We just took their country, and now we can just forget about them. But unfortunately, they really, I believe, until we can heal the American Indians, we won't be able to heal ourselves, because this is who it speaks to who we are as a people. Mm-hmm. It's always easy to point other fingers and over there, well, because it's American greed, corporate greed. They have the oil, they have gold, they have, things that we need here. So, we'll go there and we'll solve their problems, and then we disrupt the rest of the places that we say we're quote-unquote helping. We're helping ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the precedent that's been set going back all through history. It's just interesting that every single issue that you look at, from Native Americans to what's happening in, West Africa right now to what's happening in Ukraine right now, it's all agenda-driven. I mean, going back even to World War I, the sinking of the Maine, it's all money, it's all agenda-driven. And I think that this is just another situation like that. I want to open up the phone lines for anyone who might have a comment. If you live in the area, if you have experience with this sort of issue, 855-995-6923 is the number to call. Again, it's 855-995-6923. And Leslye, what is one of the solutions? What are the solutions going forward? What can we do? How can we get involved? What do you need from us?
Well, it's what the Lakota said. I don't want to speak for them. I'm trying to speak, as the result of what they said and bringing it to light to other people, because I do have this opportunity. And thank God for film. Media really is the way to go. It's the way to open up doors to educate people. And part of that is what they're asking for is a library. A library is a multifunctional institution where you can have movies. You can have this. You go to libraries here. You have movie night. You see these large screens. They have all the digital equipment. You can Skype. You don't have to be isolated any longer. People can, even though it's a very difficult place and expensive to try to get to, you can have people from all over the world, from all different professions, interacting now with people that can be set up to give workshops. It's a door to the rest of the world. If you have a library, books, a senior center, different programs, you can hold meetings there. A library in the town of Pine Ridge and with an annex in another town, which I think is about 30 miles away, Porcupine, would just be the most wonderful thing. And children can learn how to read. Mm-hmm. There's no books. And many people don't even have a high school education.
One of the things I want to add is that we had some of the people from the Lakota on almost about a year ago. It was really, really cold there at the time, so it had to be, well, it wasn't a year ago now. But anyway, we sent up heaters for them, and we sent up boxes and boxes and boxes of clothing. But that's only kind of a temporary kind of thing. That's not going to be that's not going to be a solution. But this is an agenda. We need to recognize, first of all, these things are agendas, ladies and gentlemen.
We need to teach a man to fish solutions. When we come back, we're going to figure this out. We're going to go to the phone calls. Stay right here. Leslye Abbey, 3-minute break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Power Hour radio show, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment today with Leslye Abbey. We're discussing the Lakota Sioux Indian and the plight of them, and the documentary film that she made called Buffalo Nation, Children Are Crying. Very poignant film. I recommend everyone go to Snowflake Video Productions or snowflakevideo.com so that you can acquire your copy of the film. And I want to jump right to the phone lines because the board is full. And I want to start with Renee in North Carolina. Renee, you are on the air with Leslye Abbey. Go ahead, please.
First of all, I want to thank you and Joyce for having this show. This is a subject that is generally avoided in this genre because it's so shameful. And it's not just the physical murder. What people don't understand is the spiritual murder, how they've broken these people, where, the ones that haven't been killed almost make them wish they were dead and have to turn to alcohol, and how painful this is, how they're left twisting in the wind on land that is so non-productive. They have no choice. People, they need to pillow yourself up by your bootstraps. They don't have socks, okay? And people don't get it because they don't want to get it. And thank you. This speaks so well of y'all to face this issue, because they're in this genre. There's a lot of what I call narcissistic white male whining, acting like they're the victims, and they never want to talk about what they have done to other people because it hurts too bad. We shouldn't focus on the sins of others until we focus on our own sins. But that's hard and painful, and thank you so much for having this show.
Wow, thank you, Renee.
Very poignant, yes. Thank you, Renee. What do you think? Go ahead, Leslye.
Well, I think, just to segue a little bit from that, I think this is not a political issue. It's not a civil rights issue. It's a human rights issue.
Yes.
And these people, and they say, we are human beings. Hello? Mm-hmm. This is really the shame of America, and that's why nobody talks about it. Nobody wants to deal with it. Well, it's too complicated. Sure, it's complicated. You strip a culture from everything that they've ever had, and you put them in isolation and give them little or nothing, and what do you think's going to happen? What is going to we give them alcohol. What do you think's going to happen? How are these people going to turn out? Mm-hmm. This is what we've done. This is our shame.
I completely agree.
Boy, is it.
I completely agree. Let's move on to Sean in Arizona. Sean, you're on the air with Leslye Abbey. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Josh and Joyce. Look, I was raised on the White Mountain Reservation, all right?
Mm-hmm.
I have been friends with people from the Lakotas, and I've even been adopted by one of the Lakota major medicine men. And I'm going to tell you right now that this woman has brought out something that is so close to the total reality of it that it's unreal. I've kept my mouth shut about a lot of things on your show, Joyce, because I've got a master's degree in abstract American history. I specialize in Native American cultures.
Why don't you email me at thepowerhour@thepowerhour.com. I'd like to talk to you more about this, and perhaps we can have you on the show. I'd love to hear your story. So email me, thepowerhour@thepowerhour.com. I'm sorry we're out of time, but it would be fascinating to talk with you, or give me a call at the Power Mall. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and understanding.
Thank you, Leslye. Thank you, Leslye, for bringing it to our attention. We need to be reminded more and more often to take care of our own. Thank you so very much. It makes me want to cry.
Yes, please see the movie, Buffalo Nation, The Children Are Crying. It needs to be seen and understood.
Yes. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a blessed day. Alan Watt will be on.